And we're going to just kind of talk about how this season is going to, or this game coming up is going to be good. We talked with Nick from Penn Live as well, and then we talked with Carl. Oh, you talked with Carl about the Bills' perspective of this big game coming up. But you know, both teams coming off of a loss. The Steelers coming off of a tough loss that was just by 3 points. And as we talked about to Nick, he thinks that if Aaron Rodgers were to play that game, he would have won that game. Which I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Ricky?
I actually do agree with him, particularly with how the game transpired. If you were going to tell me that it's a one possession game and who would you rather have, Mason Rudolph or Aaron Rodgers? I mean, that's a pretty simple question, but you don't know that going in. You didn't know Aaron Rodgers' health. It certainly seemed like Aaron Rodgers wanted to play in this game. I think I was one of the people that I was more, if I wanted Aaron healthy for this game, but I didn't realize just how bad Mason Rudolph, the outing he was going to put in this game. Nick talked a lot about some of the missed routes, and there were a lot on that last drive. He missed a real deep ball to Roman Wilson that could have changed the course of that game. Of course, the play there towards the end with the illegal formation, that was a big tide shifter because Mason Rudolph takes off for a 22-yard run to the Chicago 49 and gets called back. It's a 3rd and 9, and Pittsburgh doesn't convert, has to punt the ball back. But yeah, this game, again, I think it would have gone differently had Aaron Rodgers played, and I'm sure he probably feels that way as well. Going 25-5 against that team in his career. So it's unfortunate the game ended how it did for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but unfortunately for them, you have to have a short memory. You have to move on to this week against Buffalo, a team you haven't had a lot of success against as of recently, losing 4 out of your last 5 to them. And of course, you're going to be without one of your 2 of your better young players. Broderick Jones going to be missing at the tackle position, as well as Derek Harmon is going to be missing at the right tackle position as well. But the team certainly is going to have some issues there, and we'll hopefully get it worked out this week. They look to have Calvin Anderson at the left tackle position and Y.A. Black, who's been a little bit up and down, but when he's been good, he's been good. But when he's been bad, he's been bad. As Nick talks a little bit about his snap fluctuation this year and why that has been in a lot of games. But yeah, this is a big game for both teams. Josh Allen, of course, getting sacked 8 times in their last game. They're dealing with some injuries on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. They signed Brandon Cooks, who at this stage of his career probably isn't going to be a huge difference maker. Just another probably veteran wide receiver, signing someone that they could rely on, but still the Bills probably have bigger holes than Brandon Cooks will be able to fill there. But yeah, this is going to be a big game for both teams, particularly with both teams in the thick of the playoff hunt and sort of looking for some momentum this week and carrying it forward to hopefully keep pace in the division, as well as also keeping pace in the wild card race as well.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the Bills' schedule from this year. The losses that they've had. They lost in week 5 and 6 to the Patriots and Falcons, but then they came back. They had a bye week. That's something to take into account. But after that, they won 2 straight games. Then they lost to the Dolphins. Then they came back and beat the Bucs. They lose to the Texans. It seems like they seem to rally after each loss, besides those 2 consecutive, but then they go and win 2 consecutive. So it's like this team seems to really kind of figure things out and take things from their loss and, apply them to the next game. And again, you have Josh Allen at the helm of your team. It's kind of hard he rallies. Once he gets going, it's hard to stop any player on that team, offense or defense. So I think, the Texans also, they have probably the best defense in the league, or one of the best. So again, it's kind of was it a really good defensive performance, a really good bad offensive performance by, the Bills? I think it probably was a mixture of both because, you had Dalton Kincaid out and all of that. So just a lot of factors to keep in mind, especially as these two head into a point in the season where wins are really big. Surprisingly, the Patriots are doing really well. The Bills are you wouldn't have thought at the beginning of the season that the Bills would have to fight with the Patriots to get that number 1 spot in the division. Steelers, I think we thought at the beginning of the season it was going to be the Ravens, but they've been up and down, doing really good now with Lamar Jackson back. But Steelers, they need this win in order to like have that top spot in the division too. So really big implications for both teams in this game.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have said, I thought the Patriots would certainly take a step in the right direction this year. I knew they, in part because of they had a little bit of a weaker schedule, but I like the hiring of Mike Vrabel. Of course, Drake May, a step in the right direction. His second year, he's in, of course, MVP conversations as well with Matt Stafford and a few others up there. But Will Campbell along the offensive line, I like what they did in the draft and getting Travion Henderson as well. They went out and got Craig Woodson in I think it was the second or third round at the safety position. There was a lot of turnover, and they went out and got Harold Landry and they upgraded their linebacking core. But if you said
Diggs
this,
too, yeah.
Yep, Stephon Diggs, that the wide receiver, can't forget that one. That's proved to be some big dividends there, and he's proved to be that Drake May's number one wide receiver despite some injury concerns heading into the year. Of course, you have some age and attrition. You don't know how players are going to age, and there was certainly some risk attached with signing him. Of course, there was some drama in previous places he's been, Buffalo with Josh Allen, and of course that big injury in Houston he suffered just 1 year ago, the torn ACL. But
he never did he even play?
He did,
like in the beginning, probably.
Yes, in the beginning, and then he tore his ACL.
Yeah.
I think around mid-season, and that really put the Bills in a bind at their wide receiving core. But yeah, they've been in a battle all year. If there was any team you thought they'd be in a battle with, it would maybe be Miami with Tua and Tyreek, but that sort of has fizzled out. And the Dolphins are playing better right now in the season, but they've sort of fizzled out early on and put themselves in a really hard position. And Pittsburgh had like a 3.5-4 game lead, but I could have told you when they were 4-1 sitting there, this lead was going to fizzle out. One, because their schedule gets tougher, and number two, because I know how this team operates.
Yeah.
They don't operate well late in the year. They seem to fizzle out. The offense and defense just seem to struggle one week and into another, and there never seems to be any consistency heading into knowing what you're going to get late in the season. And that's where the good teams come out to play late in the year and being able to win ball games. Because remember, this team last year was 10-3, sitting pretty, and then they lose their last 5 games, including their playoff game in Baltimore. That's just not something good teams do. Good teams play their best football towards the end of the year, and that's just not what Pittsburgh has done in recent years. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting challenge for both teams, but Pittsburgh in particular, you want to keep pace with Baltimore. I think you have Baltimore coming up soon on your schedule as well. I think after this week, it's Ravens week, and that's going to be a big one for this division. The Ravens, I believe, have the Bengals on Thanksgiving with Joe Burrow returning, so that should be an interesting game. But this is a big one for both teams, but if Pittsburgh wants to keep pace in their division, you got to think they need to win this game before they travel to Baltimore to face them off, before they face them in the last game of the year, which, hypothetically, if Pittsburgh keeps pace with them, could be for the division, or it could be meaningless for the Pittsburgh Steelers and maybe just, a game to get by, or, they could possibly be in the wild card as well.
Yeah, having to face them twice towards the latter half of the year is not fun, so, hopefully they can surprise us and prove us wrong in coming out with a win this week, but we will just have to wait and see. We will get to should we take a quick break, or do you want to get into that? Let's take a quick break, and then we'll get into our interview with Nick Farabugh, the Penn Live Steelers beat reporter. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to 2822 Sports Night, brought to you by Hyundai. We are going to get into an interview that we had with Nick Farabugh from Penn Live. He is the Steelers beat reporter with them. He had some really great insight and just so knowledgeable on this team. And I think Ricky can attest to the fact that he touched on a lot of things that needed answering, and you seem to agree with a lot of that he talked about. So we'll get into that, and we'll touch on it after we watch it too. But here's the interview. For joining us today. So excited to talk about Steelers Bills game coming up. Big, implications for Steelers division. Ricky is a really big Steelers fan, so I'm sure he has tons of questions. I'll let him have the floor first.
Yeah, this is obviously a lot of playoff implications with this one. Pittsburgh needing a win. Now I think Baltimore having the lead in the AFC North, but got to go back to this Bears game. And unfortunately for them, it did not go well. Offensively, they struggled to find the middle of the field. The run game seemed to work well, but down the field passing, not pushing the ball down the field, seeming to be a bit of a concern there. Did Mike Tomlin have anything to say regarding the team's ability to push the ball down the field, find the middle of the field, or anything like that? Because going into Arthur Smith's tenure here, the team, or Arthur Smith at least, was a guy known for attacking the middle of the field, using the tight ends and being able to push down the field. This year, it seemingly has not translated maybe the way that they thought it would.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Tomlin basically said today, in terms of the Bears game, he thought Mason Rudolph left some plays out on the field. I'd agree with that. The DK Metcalf, the wall throw to DK Metcalf on the second
Yes.
play of the game, that was a pick, was underthrown. And then the second one was the second to last drive where he just didn't even give Roman Wilson a chance, who was open down the field. It would have been a game-changing play. So those two in terms of the downfield passing attack. But this is really the first time I can remember, because we've been asking Mike Tomlin about the middle of the field since Big Ben was
Yeah.
still around. I mean, this has been 5 or 6 years now. And this is like the first time he's actually said, yeah, there are opportunities on the interior of the field that we should be exploiting it. And on that same play to Rowan Wilson, if you go back and watch it, DK Metcalf is wide open on a crosser. And so you see some of them. And I don't think it's like the main philosophy of the Steelers. I still think they don't want to target the middle of the field a lot because that's where a lot of turnovers happen. It's the most dangerous area to throw. And I think that speaks to Mike's confidence somewhat in somewhat of the receivers, but also probably more quarterback stuff. I think it's quarterback heavy in that regard. But clearly, I mean, Mike Tomlin wants them to be more explosive through the air. They are a 10 yards and in offense right now through the air. And it's not sustainable to be that. You have to throw the ball at least in the intermediate part of the field. You don't have to like air it out, 30 yards down the field on a post ball or throw 40-yard go balls, but you need to have dig routes and crossers and things like that in the 10 to 15-yard area. And Steelers just do not have that right now.
Yeah, and sticking with the offense, Aaron Rodgers obviously out in that Bears game. How much of an impact does he have on that offense? We saw him on the sideline. Rick and I were talking about this with that illegal formation with Calvin Austin. He saw it right away. Will he see that on the field before it happens and be able to command that offense better? How much of an impact has he had this season on this offense? And, would they have potentially won that game? It was a close game if he was there.
Yeah, I think they probably do. There were a lot of people going into the game that were talking about how there wasn't going to be much of a drop off between Rudolph and Rodgers, and I just thought Rudolph, I mean, to be blunt, was brutal in this game against the Bears, missing reads, underthrowing balls, scattering it, running into sacks. Both sacks, in my opinion, were on Mason Rudolph. Just pretty brutal stuff from him. And Rodgers, what he does pre-snap, just setting protections and having kind of the football IQ to get things run smoothly. I think that's the real key is, when they broke the huddle, I think there were like 10 seconds left on that illegal formation play. Gainwell lines up on the wrong side of the formation. They send Gainwell across the other side. Calvin Austin and Mason Rudolph both see that Faltano is not covered up and point to Gainwell to go do it, but there's 3 seconds left on the game clock. So you're either going to get an illegal formation or delay a game, or because they didn't have a timeout, remember. They did not have a timeout at that point in the game. So it just bad process. And Rodgers, they got to get out of the huddle earlier. So Rodgers would have had them out of the huddle earlier, would have had them kind of in a better spot there. I think the operation just runs more smoothly. Now, we'd seen, before Rodgers got hurt, the offense wasn't exactly humming with him in there, was it? So a lot of the same issues, not throwing the ball down the field. Rodgers is willing to attempt down the field, but we've seen him really kind of miss on a lot of those throws. The accuracy just falls off the face of the earth. But I think what he brings pre-snap, the getting the ball to the right place, things like that, is just much better with Rodgers in there versus Rudolph. So I think Rodgers certainly does make a difference. Do they win that game in Chicago? I tend to think so, given how potent the run game was. I think Rodgers would have been able to really point guard and game manage them a lot better than Rudolph did. So I think they probably do win that with Rodgers in there. But I don't want to act like in the future that's some potion that makes this offense potent again.
And now flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, the Bears obviously made it a point to attack the Steelers in the middle of the field. Mike Tomlin, I think, talked a little bit about how Chicago was more potent than they expected in the play action game, and that being a factor. And although they didn't run the ball extremely well, being the second-ranked run offense in the NFL, but there was one major gap defensively. It was, I think. When the Bears got in the red zone, they ran 4 verticals, and the Steelers were sitting in a cover 3 defense. And if you just look at that numerically, I don't think, or 4 people could, or 3 cornerbacks can cover 4 players running vertically. And people talked a lot about the Steelers not running a match zone, their defense being a little bit more antiquated than maybe more modern defenses are with a match zone coverage. And can you explain Mike Tomlin's explanation or what you saw in that defense early or on that play specifically, and what they could do to improve that going forward?
I mean, you're dead on. Really, the issue is you don't run cover 3 to trips because, as you mentioned, it's a math problem. When you are in country cover 3, you have only 3 guys deep, and teams are just going to look at it and say, "Well, we got 4 guys, 1 from the backside, 3 here," and you just can't cover all of them. It doesn't matter the technique you play. Like, people are hating on Eccles for that, but if it's country cover 3, he's the flat defender. The match coverage you're talking about would have called for Eccles to go vertical with that, and it changes the math. So you have to check out of that call, right? It's just bad football. There was another play where Kyle Monungai runs in for 2 yards on a 3rd and goal. They're in 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, 1 tight end. And the Steelers have 2 down linemen on the goal line on 3rd and goal with the 2. They just run right up the middle, right through the open gap. Like, just bad defense, playing in nickel on the goal line like that. The coaching just was not up to snuff. I think you have noticed over the past 3 games before this, they'd run a lot more of their 2 high stuff, the cover 2, the quarters, the cover 6, stuff like that. They went back to their single high stuff, which has always been their bread and butter in this game, and it looked very similar to an early of the year game, to where when they got shredded by the Jets and the Seahawks, for example, looked far similar to that than it had in previous weeks. And so they just fell short. They put guys in tough positions. Patrick Queen also talked about this. A lot of the play action stuff in cover 3, when you have 2 guys spreading the field like they were with the daggers and the seam balls and different things like that, it's hard for the linebackers hanging on the hash to try and get depth and cover all of that grass behind them. And really, Ben Johnson just exploited it. They were thoroughly outcoached in this game. The Steelers put their players in a really bad spot, to be quite honest with you, in a lot of these games. I understand they wanted to slow down the run game, but they had slowed down the run game out of too high. When the Bears ran against the Steelers 2 high looks in this game, they had 6 rushes for 12 yards. So they were able to do it. They just never went back to it. So, yeah, that's pretty par for the course for Pittsburgh right now.
Yeah, and the Steelers, they're going against a tough Bills offense. Bills, I just saw they picked up Brandon Cooks. I know they were kind of struggling with figuring out that wide receiver room. And I'm a Dallas fan. We had him, for a little bit, and he's a good receiver, especially when he's in the end zone. Some of those deep ball passes. What do they have to do? Also, Bills, Josh Allen, he is unstoppable in most games with his legs and his arms. I mean, reigning MVP for a reason. What does this defense have to, do and regroup, especially for a Bills offense that is so dominant almost every week? I know they lost to the Texans last time, but almost every single week they're dominant.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 parts to this. I think, one, they have to slow down James Cook in the ground game, which I think has become really, really dominant. But the Steelers have been good in terms of their run defense the last month. So you feel like you can maybe slow them down, despite that being, I think, one of the best ground games in the league. Because, to be quite honest with you, the Bills just do not run the ball enough. They need to run the ball more with Cook and Allen and do that, but they don't lean into it enough. And if they don't, what the Steelers need to do is slow down that rushing attack, make it a non-explosive rushing attack, even if they get success. Make it 8 yards instead of 25, 30. And they need to put the onus on this passing game, because while Brandon Cooks is signing, I think 5 days might be a little quick for Brandon Cooks to play. Now, he might, but even still, if you watch the Brandon Cooks tape, it ain't very good. It's not like he's going to be, the old Brandon Cooks where he was getting 1,000 yards every year. Keon Coleman is in a weird off the ropes funk. He's probably going to play this week, it seems like. Um, but this Bills receiving core, I mean, if they don't have Dalton Kincaid, that's a huge issue for them because he's their seam buster down the field. And you need to put the onus on Keon Coleman, Tyrell Shavers, Mac Hollins, used to be kind of the big guy in that room, and they really haven't found a pure slot receiver to replace him. Coleman is probably the best thing to do that, but they need him to play outside. So the receivers, I think the Pittsburgh secondary can match up against it. Now, Eccles against Khalil Shakir, I don't love that matchup, but I think the Steelers have to put the onus on Josh Allen to make the plays and try and make these receivers make tough plays for their quarterback. I think that's the way to do it. You pressure Allen a little bit. Maybe you can get a pick or a fumble, and the Steelers D line has to dominate. I think that's really Ricky probably knows this very well. When the Steelers D line dominates up front, usually Pittsburgh's in the game and can win these games. It's how they beat the Colts. It's how they beat the Patriots. They were dominant up front. And that's really what Pittsburgh has to do. So they have to stop the run, and they have to put the onus on the receivers to make plays for Josh Allen. Can't let these guys run wide open and make plays. So if the receivers make the plays, good for them. But I think that's what Pittsburgh needs to do to try and slow down this offense.
Yeah, the when the defensive line gets pressure and turnovers is really the calling card of this defense. If they don't pressure, if they don't get turnovers, they're not winning ball games. And that's sort of what happened. One of the things that happened last week against Chicago, they had that one strip sack against Caleb Williams where he probably should have thrown it away. It reminded me of the Aaron Rodgers play near the end zone. But Pittsburgh, I think, just had one sack, didn't get much, had their lowest pressure rate of the season maybe with 13%. And they just were not able to get consistently after Caleb Williams. But yeah, the Shakir against Eccles matchup, Shakir's probably their only game buster on the outside in terms of winning man-to-man matchups. His explosiveness, I think, gave them problems in their playoff matchup a couple of years ago as well. But he's probably the one guy that's going to help break this room. But with the Steelers also, defensively, they're going to offensively and defensively, they're dealing with some injuries. Broderick Jones is a stinger. It looks like he's going to be out. And then Derek Harmon, who battled through most of that game with a knee injury. What loss do you think, in your opinion, is more significant? The Harmon loss, who it looks like Y.A. Black is going to get the start, or the Broderick Jones loss on the outside, where Calvin Anderson is probably going to get the start there?
I think it's Harmon. And because specifically about this matchup, how good of a run defender he is, I think is going to be missed. He helps cover up for Keanu Benton at times. Benton is still kind of the same player. He's not a great run defender. There are 3 to 4 times if you watch the game, Benton just gets detonated back into Patrick Queen's lap. It's an occurrence. And Harmon was excellent in run defense on Sunday. I thought it was a big part of why they were able to slow him down. YA has been pretty inconsistent. He's sometimes been able to be really good. It kind of depends. You don't know which YA Black you're going to get. Sometimes he gets 6 snaps because the 6 snaps are really bad. Sometimes he gets 20 because he's playing really well. He's a very inconsistent player. And so if he shows up and can play really well, I think the Steelers could be cooking with something. But what's that rotation even behind him going to look like? We're going to be talking about guys like Azazie Otomowo and Broderick Martin Rhodes and Logan Lee playing. And I think that's a concern for the Steelers. Listen, Broderick Jones has been better than he was last year, but he still hasn't been that good this year. Calvin Anderson played fine, I think, when he got in there. I don't think he was a big issue. So I really think Harmon has the potential to be a big loss if the Bills can really run the ball all over the Steelers defense, because Y.A. Black has not been consistent this year. So who knows which one's going to show up really in terms of that version of him.
Yeah, and we have time for just one more question. I'm going to let Ricky take the floor again because he's the Steelers fan here. So, Ricky, you want to ask the last question?
Sure, I'll double dip. You mentioned the Steelers' defensive line, of course, is going to have to be the factor in this game. I think the Bills allowed 8 sacks, 70 sack yards. Josh Allen, I think the coach, Sean McDermott, said he was sore coming out of that game, and rightfully so. And then their right tackle was dealing with a shoulder injury. I think that was a part of it because he was just getting beat like a turnstile off the edge with Daniil Hunter there. Did you see any reason why the Steelers' defensive line struggled last week? Is it just age and attrition because they're an older unit up front? They are expected to get Alex Highsmith back? Or what does this defensive line need to do up front to start getting to the QB a little bit more and certainly generate more pressure on Josh Allen?
I mean, part of it is that Bears interior is really good, and Darnell Wright's also great. Caleb also just did not hold onto the ball as much as I think they maybe thought. They talked all week about how he extends plays, extends plays. He did not extend plays much this week. He actually stayed in the pocket and won from the pocket. I think 2.6 time to throw. That's a career low for Caleb. He got the ball out quick and in structure. Credit to him. He changed his play style, and I think the Steelers were a little surprised by it. So I think that was part of it. I think the other part is, again, they faced a really good offensive line. So the Bears just won that day. We've seen the Steelers D line beat up on good O lines. They crushed the Colts O line, for goodness sakes. So we know they can do it. In terms of what they need to do, I think Cam Hayward is starting to slow down a little bit. I don't think he's the elite player he was. T.J. Watt is not the elite player he was. He's still a very good player. I think they need to find ways to kind of utilize the attention Watt gets to their advantage. I don't think they ran some real funky pressure looks. Like they blitzed Porter on one play and left the guy wide open behind it. They sent Eccles a few times. Just not really good blitzers, and it takes them a millennium to get there. So their sim pressures are kind of odd. I think they just need to figure out a way to utilize it. Also, Highsmith getting back will be really good. To be quite honest with you, the last 2 weeks, I've not been very impressed with Jack Sawyer. I think he's been pretty bad, to be quite honest with you. So I think that'll be something the Steelers can look to as well, to the three outside linebacker package. But they just kind of need to win a little bit more consistently at times. But I do think they also just faced a really good offensive line. I think the Bears O line is better than this Bills O line. We'll see where it goes. I do think the Bills, in terms of the run blocking element, very, very good. In terms of pass pro, I think they're gettable.
All right. Okay. So who are you picking to win this game?
I'm picking the Bills. I just it's the Steelers to me are, and I wrote this after the game on Sunday. I said they are the NFL's most mediocre football team. They're not bad, they're not good, they're just mid. And I think that's the best way to describe them. So they could win this game. It's not going to stun me if they do. I think they're going to compete in this game, but I take the Josh Allen effect into consideration here. I think without Harmon too, Cook is probably going to find some success on the ground. I think the Steelers should be able to run the ball in this game. I don't think this Bills defense is very good defending the run. So I do think that can be a really boon for the Steelers. If they win this game, it's going to give the defense gets one or two turnovers, and they're going to be able to run the ball, and the Steelers take care of the football. But I'm taking the Bills because I think Josh Allen is just going to take over this game to a degree. So I'll take the Bills in this one. Been a close game, I'm thinking like 27-21, 27-24, somewhere around there. I'll take Buffalo.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us today for that in-depth insight into this game. We'll be looking out for all of those things that you mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good rest of your day. All right. We are joined with... It was great to get that insight from Nick. We were talking about, while that was rolling, just how knowledgeable he is. I was like, this guy knows his stuff. So, I mean... I can't wait to have him back on again because he was great.
Yes, Nick is very, very insightful. Usually one of my go-to guys in terms of, if I'm looking for Steelers content, what to look out for game to game, what he's seeing. He does a great job with Penn Live breaking down all these games. And, I sort of laugh when I don't know whether to laugh or cry when he's immediately answered, who do you win this game? Oh, the Bills.
Yeah, it was no hesitation.
No hesitation. And he talked about the Steelers are just, again, we both want them to win. It's not like we're here like we'd rather be wrong about this team being mediocre than like right. Oh, I told you so. No, we want to be wrong about this team, but if we're being honest, they're mediocre.
Like if you're betting on it, if there's money if you're betting on it, then you're
probably taking the Bills.
Yeah,
because the Bills have the better QB. The Bills are probably really good run game. Nick mentioned they're going to be missing Derek. The Steelers are going to be missing Derek Harmon up front, and that he's played great. And I don't think the numbers have really translated into people's head just how good he's playing. I think he's been an exceptional run defender. He's a high motor guy, high character guy, and I think Omar Khan and the guys he's actually drafted pretty well, but I just think the collection of talent, Nick talked a lot about Pittsburgh's archaic defenses that they run, because I think their defenses are outdated. I don't love Terrell Austin. I'm not a Terrell Austin guy. I don't think I've never really been a fan. But again, it's not just Terrell Austin. Mike Tomlin has a hand in this defense. But if you're sitting there and thinking, oh, Mike Tomlin calls the defense. Mike Tomlin, I'm sure, has a big hand in what the defenses do, but Terrell Austin isn't sitting in his office and playing on his Game Boy or Xbox all day. Terrell Austin is designing the game plan, but I just think their game plan's really outdated. They've got a really small play sheet. Their defense isn't really that complicated. They don't really run too complicated of a scheme. And as Nick said, they got away from what was working in that game against the Bears. They were playing a lot of too high lately, and the too high was working. We don't us as Steeler fans, we don't know why they get away from sometimes the stuff that is working. The too high stuff was working. Even when they were bringing down, even when they were running too high, it was still working. Nick said they had 6 carries for 12 yards when Pittsburgh was running those too high safety looks. So why they didn't get back to that was beyond Nick, and it was beyond me as well, because it was working, and it's been working the last couple games. But it's just the coaching at times, and Ben Johnson was such a great hire for this Bears team, and I think he really exposed Terrell Austin. I don't think Mike Tomlin had a great day. I think Arthur Smith actually didn't do a bad job at calling the offenses. Mason Rudolph, I just thought, missed a lot of players over the middle, and whether, this has been a question since Big Ben has been around late in his career, the last 6-7 years. Why isn't this team throwing across the middle? It's sort of, I think, has something to do with Mike Tomlin, but it also has something to do with what I think the team's QB play with an older Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph, who's, a noted gunslinger, but has missed plays at times. Kenny Pickett has missed plays at times. I think it's a mix of both, but yeah, as a Steeler fan, just last game was a lot of frustration, because this is a game they should have won, and if they play Aaron Rodgers, maybe they do win, but just a lot of frustration with the coaching, and it's getting worse and worse every year, and we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, it was a frustrating week last week for the Pittsburgh Steelers coaching, at least defensively more so.
Yeah, and one name that I don't think we've talked about yet, but one player on your team that I've been very impressed by, and who is just constantly good in week day and week out. Well, I don't know what I'm saying. Week in and week out. Yeah. Thank you. I literally had a brain fart there. It's Pat Freiermuth. I think he is he needs to get more targets. And again, if you throw over the middle, I feel like you do get him more. But so I think, getting him more involved too. Like, he doesn't ever seem to drop passes. He comes in clutch in the most clutch timing too, like that one touchdown to him in the Bears game too. But yeah, I've just been really impressed with his play. But, like you said, getting things going over the middle, that'll get him involved, a guy who is always reliable.
Yeah, and that was one of the things Pittsburgh, I think, should have done more in this game in particular, at least.
Yeah.
The Bears were missing their top 3 inside linebackers. Terrell Edmunds is a heck of a player, a great athlete. TJ Edwards, same with him. And then they were missing, I think, Noah Sewell as well. They were missing their top 3 inside linebackers. That's the perfect time in a game where you run the ball well to attack the middle of the field, and they didn't do that. But yeah, she mentioned Pat Freiermuth. I'd agree. I actually, there have been a lot of speculation on whether he was worth the 4-year, $48 million contract, and his production has been down. That isn't a lie, but I also think it's the fact that for some reason they're not getting 88 the ball.
Yeah,
I think in terms of being a wide receiver, Pat Freiermuth, Mike Tomlin's called him this on several occasions. He's a zone buster. This guy knows how to settle down in zone coverage. He knows how to get open. He's very savvy. He's very QB friendly. He knows how to get back to the QB. And listen, when he's had opportunities this season, I think he's made plays. That play in the end zone, that was one of Mason Rudolph's best plays of the day. He attacked the middle of the field and found Pat Freiermuth. They sort of forgot about them. 2 guys, I think, went more towards the goal line, and Pat Freiermuth sort of sunk in behind them there, and Mason Rudolph made a heck of a throw. But good things happen when you get 88 the football, and I don't think they did that enough. I don't think they used the tight ends enough in that game. Jonnu Smith, who they got in the offseason, they haven't really used him to the degree I thought they would. I thought they would try and get him the ball over the middle, create mismatches on the outside for him. That hasn't really transpired. But yeah, Pat Freiermuth is a guy who not many people have talked about this season, but I think when you've gotten him the ball, he's made plays. That Bengals game, He made a lot of plays, and it's been disappointing to see him pay him all that money. And he's been a good sport about it.
Yeah.
He hasn't gone around pouting. He's been a relatively good teammate. He's been a respectable locker room guy. Pittsburgh just hasn't done a good job at scheming people open, and that's one of my gripes about Arthur Smith. They don't do a great job at scheming people open. Now, do they have great personnel? No, but the tight end room in particular is a room that I think you should be able to create mismatches, especially towards the latter half of the year. You don't have a wide receiver, too. Let's put it this way. Kenneth Gainwell is tied for DK Metcalf in the lead with receptions
I saw this
on this team.
I saw this thing that said George Pickens has more receiving yards than the entire
He
Steelers.
does. He does.
That was that blew my mind.
Yes, George Pickens has had a great year, but context is also big.
Yes, that's true.
Dak Prescott's a better QB than Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career. He's in a better system that utilizes his talents more, something that could be placed on Arthur Smith and the lack of utilization there. But I mean, yeah, George Pickens is a heck of a football player, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't think he'd be this good, but the way Dallas has used him and the way he's produced, props to him. He's going to get paid big time this offseason, whether it's from Dallas or from another team. George Pickens, the way he's produced, the maturity he's shown this year, the plays he's making, that guy's going to get a nice chunk of change. But I also don't think he would have been producing this way in the Steelers offense because the Steelers don't use their wide receivers in the fashion they should have. I think they've misused DK Metcalf to a degree because they're just sending him on streaks. That's not how DK Metcalf is used. He's big and strong, don't get me wrong, and you can use him in that way. But this is a guy who is at his best when he's catching the ball on the run on these in routes, these dig routes that Nick Farabugh was talking about across the middle, and him just creating speed. And he had an opportunity in that game to do that. Mason Rudolph just didn't see him.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating and it's a shame to watch because DK Metcalf is just such a talented wide receiver. Like you said, he's a big guy, but he's fast too. And we need, especially after the catch, like he's good after the run. Like he's so good at that.
Yeah,
so
he's
just
running people over.
Yeah, exactly. And like for a big guy to run that fast, that's so big. So it's just like you have to work those plays around the players that are, performing and executing those, because it's like, yeah, these might be good plays for some receivers, but for DK Metcalf, like you said, those certain routes just work really well for him, and he's just so talented. It's just like, she seems like a waste, so that's frustrating. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the college football playoff rankings and that Notre Dame game on Saturday that broke my heart. We'll be right back.
And now joining us from the Bills' point of view will be WIVB Sports Reporter Carl Jones to give us the latest with the Bills up in Buffalo, coming off of a loss to the Houston Texans. So, Carl, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me today, Ricky. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I know we had some conflicts earlier, but I think we're good now. To get started, obviously coming off of a tough loss to Houston in a game where Josh Allen was sacked 8 times. The passing game couldn't really get going. Allen turned the ball over a handful of times as well, but the big question really right now for this team probably appears to be at the wide receiver position. Keon Coleman was a healthy scratch 2 weeks in a row. The team recently signed Brandon Cooks, hoping to give some spark to that room, but the team has really been limited trying to push the ball down the field. Khalil Shakir has been the only player that has given this team consistent production at the wide receiver position outside of Keon Coleman. So what did Sean McDermott say this week about I guess you don't know about the addition of Brandon Cooks yet, or about this wide receiver room and what the team could do better in that area in getting them the ball?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Sean McDermott always likes to preach consistency. He always says that to us, and just making sure that they stay ahead of schedule and make sure they execute all of their assignments. He did speak on Joe Brady, the Bills' offensive coordinator, and just said that he has supreme faith in him to get these receivers involved no matter where they land on the talent scale. He has faith that they'll be able to get it done, but he is aware of the fact that they have struggled, and they shouldn't and won't continue to do the same things over and over again. And listen, I think Bills Mafia is beyond frustrated with the lack of production at the wide receiver position. I mean, this is dating back probably a year and a half now, despite the fact that Josh Allen won an MVP with a similar group to this. But yeah, it's definitely a situation that's an issue, and they must rectify it if they want to go on any semblance of a run this postseason.
And then the other obvious issue has been the play of the offensive line. You know, they faced a really, really good Texans pass rush with Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson, but the Bills' offensive line, they did not hold up well. Josh Allen was getting pressure specifically from that right side. I know their right tackle was Spencer Brown, was dealing with some injuries to his shoulder in that game. They eventually, I think, took him out late in that contest because of injury and just him getting beat at the right tackle position. I know Sean McDermott talked a little bit about him possibly going on IR, but what did McDermott have to say, I guess, regarding the offensive line and their job protecting Josh Allen, as well as, you know, maybe getting the ball out quicker in the pass game and establishing the run game more to help out Allen and the team's offensive line woes?
Yeah, I think they actually ran the ball pretty well Thursday night. They did a good job. I mean, the first drive of the game, they popped off a, I believe, 40-ish yard run by James Cook, had over 100 yards rushing. I think he did a sound job on the ground. It's just that when they dropped back to pass, they had no shot. And Sean McDermott tells the Bills media all the time that the game is won and lost in the trenches. I'm sure Mike Tomlin says similar things on that topic right there. And I mean, it's true. This isn't basketball or tennis or golf. This is still a physical game at its core where the big uglies up front dictate how the game goes. And I think the biggest takeaway from that game Thursday night is that they didn't give those big guys up front when it was very apparent that they were going to struggle with Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. They didn't give them enough chip help from the running backs, from the tight ends. And it was super concerning to see, considering that, listen, that's your $500 million quarterback back there fighting for his life on his back half of the game. And they really took it to Josh Allen. So I do want to add some context and say, listen, that is a really good Bills offensive line that just didn't have a day. They didn't. And it happens to the best of us. But I don't think they were also put in situations to succeed in a scenario where they were outmatched. So it was a combination of both. We're like, hey, you were outmatched, but you weren't put in the proper position to succeed anyways. And if you are a Steelers fan or anyone that is looking forward to this matchup, you should be fairly intrigued, considering the fact that you mentioned Spencer Brown probably won't play, and that is who TJ Watt is going to line over, the backup right tackle. And if they don't give TJ Watt help, and listen, TJ Watt and the word chip go hand in hand. Yeah. Chip help, he gets chipped more than anyone else in football. We've heard it all at this point. But that is going to be the hot topic this week in Western New York. I can assure you that.
Yeah, TJ Watt, as you mentioned, has been chipped, I think, more than any other edge player in the NFL this year. And that's those two the player and the word certainly go hand in hand with each other. But where the Bills may have an advantage is in the trenches. You know, you talked a lot about Sean McDermott, his stressing the importance of winning the trenches on both sides of the football. And Mike Tomlin and Sean McDermott, you know, they know each other very well. They faced off many times. I think they were college teammates as well back then. So it will be an interesting game, but the Bills, certainly, they're the best rushing team in the NFL. James Cook, the philosophy has seemed to change since Joe Brady has gotten into office, and specifically this year, they've really leaned a lot on James Cook, specifically with the lack of production in the wide receiver room. And the Steelers will be missing Derek Harmon this week, who has been a phenomenal in run defense. The Steelers dealt with a lot of struggles early, but since he has come back, and over the last month, they've really rebounded in that area. But what do you think the Bills can do this week in the run game that can really take an advantage of a Steelers run defense that, although has been better in recent games, they'll be missing one of their better run defense pieces in Derek Harmon?
Yeah, I think, listen, the Bills are DOA if they can't run the ball on the Steelers. Point blank, period. This is a game where you have to rely on a James Cook, and was probably going to be some type of conditions. I'm not a meteorologist, but I've looked at the forecast, and it won't be 70 and sunny. I'll just say that. So I think that you want to rely on your run game, especially away from home. You know, it's much easier to rely on your run game when you are away from your home stadium because of the snap count and all that good jazz, dealing with the crowd noise. So listen, if you're the Bills, you have to be able to sustain a run game at a solid clip against a Steelers team that we all know if it's 3rd and long and TJ Watt and Nick Herbig and Cam Hayward and Alex Highsmith, all they have to worry about is hunting after the quarterback, that is no recipe for success for any quarterback. So they're going to have to make sure they stay ahead of the sticks, make sure there's always 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 1, because if it's 3rd and 13 like it was Thursday night against the Texans, I'm going to see way too many highlights of TJ Watt sacking Josh Allen.
Yeah, and the Pittsburgh pass rush could be getting more of a boost this week with Alex Highsmith possibly returning from a pec injury. Mike Tomlin seemed pretty positive about that. He seemed pretty positive last week, though, as well. But he does seem that him and also Aaron Rodgers, who will also be back out there against this Bills defense. But this is a Bills team that also this year at times has struggled to stop the run. They've allowed Woody Marks, I think, had a pretty solid game last week against this Bills front. Nick Chubb had some nice carries as well, and of course they revamped this room, going out and get Joey Bosa in the offseason. Of course, you have Big Ed Oliver, who's always been a force on that defensive line as well. But what do you need to see out of this Bills defensive front against a Steelers team that again has run the ball better in recent weeks and had a pretty good outing against Chicago last week?
Yeah, listen, I'm going to be respectful here. The Bills' run defense hasn't stopped much of anyone this season. Like, they just haven't been able to do it. I mean, dating back to week 1 where Derrick Henry I felt like he had 500 yards. Alvin Kamara and Keandre Miller. I mean, Devon Achane. The list goes on and on. I'm sure everyone remembers what Bijan Robinson did on Monday Night Football. They have to be able to find a way to slow down a rushing attack because the Steelers don't really have too much of a threatening passing game. They obviously play really big. Darnell Washington, I'm happy he finally came out and said that he's 311 pounds because that brother ain't been 260 in 10 years. So he's a force. He's a force to deal with, not just in the run game, but as a threat in the flat in the passing game as well. DK Metcalf, when healthy, will be someone that the Bills are going to have to figure out. But above all else, you cannot allow Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell to run wild against you because you don't stand a chance if, once again, Aaron Rodgers is living in 2nd and 1. Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career is not trying to get hit. He's obviously banged up with the wrist. They have to make sure that they're able to get after him. But if they can't, which means that the running game is humming at a somewhat decent clip, it's going to be a long, long day for the Bills defense.
Yeah, it will. And the Steelers, again, have run the ball at a pretty efficient rate. And that is certainly that's certainly been the Steelers' bread and butter this year when they've been able to, not particularly earlier, but as of late, the team has ran it better. They've liked to get both running backs involved in Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell. But what do you think on both sides of the ball for the Bills? What do you think are the X factors? What do they need to do on both sides of the ball to win this game and to come out of Pittsburgh with both teams really, I think, reeling for a W, and the Bills right now still trying to climb an uphill battle to get back in their division, which they still have one game against the Patriots, and the Patriots also have a tougher schedule coming up in recent weeks.
Yeah, I got 3 keys for you. The Bills, first and foremost, have to take care of the football. They must do it. Every time that they've lost in these games, turnovers have been an issue. Obviously, last week against the Texans, you had a fumble, you had 2 interceptions. Unacceptable. It's hard to win away from home when you have those issues. So I think that's first and foremost. Secondly, the matchup of the Steelers' edge rushers and, quite frankly, the whole defensive line up against the Bills' offensive line is going to be a huge X factor because, once again, if they are able to hold up in protection, I think on the perimeter, they're gettable. Even though the Bills, don't get it twisted, the Bills receivers aren't great, I still don't think Darius Slay, and I think Joey Porter is actually solid, but I don't think the cornerback depth is really too threatening if you're the Buffalo Bills. It's certainly a drop-off from what they just saw in Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter. So I think that as long as Josh Allen has time, he'll be able to find some guys down the field. And then lastly, they have to tackle the Bills defense. But as you know, Jaylen Warren is hard to bring down. He runs like a mighty mouse. He's hard. He runs angry. I love watching him play because I'm happy I don't have to tackle him. He's that type of player. Darnell Washington is a monster. I still have nightmares in my head when I see him running down the sideline in that Bengals game. I felt bad for I felt bad for them. I did. That's 300. He said 311. Let's say 315 pounds running down the sideline like at 4.7 speed. Goodness gracious, couldn't be me. So I think those are the 3 keys. Don't turn the ball over, but you know the Steelers have a propensity to take the ball away, so that'll be a huge factor. Can the Bills protect and keep Josh Allen upright? And then they have to tackle because I don't think the Steelers are going to take plays from 0 to 60, but they can matriculate the ball down the field if they are able to force tackles at a somewhat decent clip.
Yes, Pittsburgh has two of the better guys at forcing missed tackles at the running back position with Jalen Warren, who's had his feature many times on some angry runs. Darnell Washington most recently a couple weeks ago as well. But me being a Steelers fan, I've enjoyed those highlights because those two probably run as hard as anyone down the field. But yes, Pittsburgh, not a team that's going to beat you over the top. They're going to dink and dunk you. They're a 10 yards and in passing game. So if the Bills tackle well, they contain those edge rushers and the turnovers. Pittsburgh lives and dies off of pressure and turnovers. You saw it last week. They generated 2 against the Bears, but they also gave the ball up twice away, which gave the Bears short field and gave them a lead late into the game, which was a big turning point, that Mason Rudolph fumble. But, Carl, do you have a game prediction? How do you see this game playing out?
I think it's going to be low scoring. I think so. The Bills offense struggles away from home, and I think there are some tangible reasons for that. They struggle away from home, but I think with 10 days off, they'll have a mindset where this is I'm not going to say it's must win because I still think they're a playoff team, but their backs are against the wall. They need to win this game if they have any hope of winning the division. Low scoring, give me 23-17. The Bills go on a drive late in the game on some theatrics, Hallmark movie stuff where they're able to punt the ball in the end zone. I think it'll be a great game, though. I don't think either team is that far away from each other, which speaks to how these two teams are built at the moment.
Yeah, no, the Bills have won 4 out of the last 5 matchups. And the last time Josh Allen played in Pittsburgh was against those Duck Hodges-led Steelers as he won that game 17-10. Not a very entertaining Sunday night football contest, but similar feel with a 4:30 start time. But Carl, thanks again for joining us. Both of our Steelers reporter picked the Bills, and now you picked the Bills. And I would probably pick the Bills as well, just because of the Josh Allen factor. But thanks again for joining us. And yeah, we'll see how this game plays out Sunday at 4:30.
Thank you, Ricky. You have a good one.
And now.
So great hearing from Carl. I actually know Carl. He was a graduate of Syracuse too. Met him a couple times. Genuinely such a nice, energetic, kind person. So good to hear from him on his perspective on this game as well. Just before we wrap up, we have a couple more just one more thing to talk about before we wrap up quickly, which is the college football playoff rankings. They came out today. Notre Dame is still at number 9, which, I guess we'll go through the rankings first. Ohio State number 1. Number 2 is Indiana. 3, Texas A&M. 4, Georgia. 5, Texas Tech. 6, Oregon. 7, Ole Miss. What are the other ones? There's Alabama. Yeah, and then Notre Dame is number 9. So I think that's like a pretty good place, even though Notre Dame destroyed Syracuse.
Yeah, talk about
that was horrible. I have some stats
I
right
want to
here.
bring that up.
Oh my God, no,
that was a bad.
Okay, here are some fun statistics, not for me, but some fun facts about this game. Notre Dame held a 21-0 lead without taking a single offensive snap.
Jeez, what the heck happened?
There was a pick 6, a blocked punt for a touchdown, and another pick 6.
Oh man!
And then they had a 35-0 lead with only 5 offensive snaps. Their quarterbacks only threw 15 times in the whole game.
Yeah, they rounded the ball.
Jeremiah Love had 8 carries for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. Averaged 21.4 yards per carry.
Oof, I didn't. I saw the score. I didn't really look that deep into the stats, but
the last time Syracuse got beat this bad, Grover Cleveland was president in 1893, and Syracuse's time of possession 43.59 seconds. Notre Dame 16 in 1 second. That is
16
so
minutes
bad.
with 70 points is something you won't see.
And we only scored that last. Let me just say, we scored that last touchdown at the very end of that game.
You did, yes.
And I think it was just Notre Dame just gave up, which
Yeah,
was frustrating for them because
upset.
they would have had a school. I think they would have had their best. I think that would have been a record. But
Marcus Freeman ain't like that, so
yeah.
he didn't want to.
But they have him and Fran Brown have a lot of respect for each other. But yeah, that was just insane to talk about. I'm sure you and Nick will talk about it if Nick wants to talk about it later in the week.
Yeah, I might
But
bring it up.
but thanks for joining us on this Tuesday night.
We'll have more Penn State
Yes,
tomorrow. We ran out of time.
Yeah, we
so
ran
I
out of
will
time, but Allie Berube with Nittany Nation, she spent some time with us today to talk about this game against Rutgers. So that'll be played tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.